What happens when royalty forgets their manners on live television? In just 37 seconds, one shocking comment turned a friendly chat into the most explosive exit in talk show history. Jonathan Ross was having what seemed like another perfect evening on his show. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement. The lights were bright. Everything was going exactly as planned. And then Prince Harry walked onto the stage. The applause was deafening. People stood up. Cameras flashed from every direction. Harry waved to the crowd with that familiar smile everyone had seen 1,000 times before. He sat down in the guest chair, adjusting his jacket like he owned the place. Jonathan leaned forward with his welcoming grin, ready to make his guest feel comfortable. "Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here," Jonathan said, his voice warm and genuine. Harry nodded. "Thanks for having me. Now, I have to say, we're absolutely thrilled you're here tonight. The audience has been waiting for this," Jonathan continued, gesturing to the excited crowd. Harry looked around the studio. His expression was hard to read. "Yeah, well, I'm here." There was something in his tone. Something that made Jonathan pause for just a second. But he was a professional. He'd interviewed thousands of people. He knew how to handle any situation. So he pressed on. "Let's talk about your recent projects. You've been quite busy, haven't you?" Jonathan asked. "Busy enough," Harry replied, leaning back in his chair. "Though I'm not sure why that's anyone's concern, but mine." The audience laughed nervously. They weren't sure if this was banter or something else. Jonathan smiled, trying to keep things light. "Well, when you're in the public eye, people tend to be curious," Jonathan said gently. Harry's face changed. "The public eye, right? Because apparently, I'm not allowed to have a private life. Is that what you're saying?" Jonathan's smile faltered slightly. No, that's not what I meant at all. I just meant that people admire you and want to know what you're up to." "Admire me?" Harry scoffed. "They don't know me. You don't know me. Nobody in this room knows me." The studio had gone quiet. You could hear the cameras still rolling. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jonathan tried to redirect the conversation. "Of course, you're absolutely right. We only know what we see. So, why don't you tell us something real? Something you'd like people to understand about you?" Jonathan offered, his tone still kind and patient. Harry stared at him for a long moment. "You really want to know something real?" "Yes, absolutely," Jonathan said, nodding encouragingly. "The real thing is that I'm tired of people like you making money off my name. Tired of sitting in chairs like this, answering the same boring questions over and over again. Tired of pretending to be interested in whatever rubbish you want to talk about," Harry said, his voice rising. The Beachian audience gasped. Jonathan sat up straighter, clearly taken aback. "I understand that these appearances can be tiring, but I think that's a bit unfair. We invited you here as a guest, to have a conversation. No one forced you to come," Jonathan responded, his voice still measured, but firmer now. Harry laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "Right, because I had so much choice in the matter. Do you know what it's like to have every move you make controlled by other people? Every word you say analyzed? Every decision questioned? I can only imagine how difficult that must be," Jonathan said sincerely. "But taking it out on me or the people here who are excited to see you doesn't seem quite fair, does it?" "Fair?" Harry's voice was getting louder. "You want to talk to me about fair? That's rich coming from someone who sits in a comfortable studio and makes jokes for a living?" Jonathan's expression remained calm, but his jaw tightened slightly. "I work very hard at what I do, and I'm proud of it. Just as I'm sure you're proud of your work. But right now, you're being disrespectful. Not just to me, but to everyone here." "Disrespectful?" Harry stood up from his chair. "You think I'm being disrespectful? Maybe you should look in the mirror. You people are the disrespectful ones, always prying, always asking questions, always wanting something from me. The audience was completely silent now. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were leaning forward, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Jonathan remained seated, his hands folded calmly in his lap. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have to say, you agreed to be here. You knew this was an interview. If you didn't want to answer questions, perhaps you shouldn't have come, Jonathan said, his voice steady. Harry pointed at Jonathan. Don't you dare tell me what I should or shouldn't do. You have no idea what my life is like. No idea what I deal with every single day. You're right, I don't, Jonathan agreed. But I do know how to treat people with respect, even when I'm having a difficult day. And right now, you're not showing that same courtesy. Harry's face was red now. Courtesy? You want to lecture me about courtesy? Do you know who I am? Jonathan stood up slowly. The movement was deliberate, calm, controlled. Yes, I know who you are, but that doesn't give you the right to come onto my show and speak to me this way. I've been nothing but welcoming to you since you walked through that door. Your show, Harry said mockingly, like you're doing me some great favor by having me here. Newsflash, I'm the reason anyone's watching tonight. Without me, this would be just another boring talk show that nobody cares about. The audience reacted with a collective sound of shock. Someone in the crowd said, "Oh no," loud enough to be heard. Jonathan took a deep breath. That's a very arrogant thing to say, Jonathan replied, his voice still remarkably calm. I've had many wonderful guests on this show, and it's been successful long before tonight. But more importantly, the people who work on this show, the crew, the audience members who came here tonight, they all deserve better than this behavior. Harry waved his hand dismissively. Oh, please spare me the speech. They're all here because of me, and you know it. Actually, they're here because they enjoy the show. They come week after week because we create something entertaining together. You're a guest, an important one certainly, but still just a guest, Jonathan said. Just a guest? Harry's voice was almost a shout now. Just a guest? Do you have any idea how many shows would kill to have me appear? And you're treating me like I'm some nobody who should be grateful to be here? Jonathan's expression hardened. I'm treating you exactly how you're treating me, with honesty. And honestly, right now, you're behaving like a spoiled child who isn't getting their way. That was the breaking point. Harry's face went from red to almost purple. How dare you speak to me like that? I don't have to stand here and take this from someone like you. Someone like me, Jonathan repeated. You mean someone who treats their job with respect? Someone who appreciates the people around them? You're right. You don't have to stand here. The door is right there. Harry stared at Jonathan. The entire studio held its breath. For a moment, it seemed like Harry might actually apologize, might take a step back and realize how badly he was behaving. But instead, he did something worse. You're just another nobody trying to make a name off of mine. This whole show is beneath me. You're beneath me. Everyone here is beneath me, Harry declared, his voice dripping with contempt. The audience erupted in a mixture of boos and gasps. Jonathan raised his hand, asking them to settle down. When he spoke again, his voice was clear and firm. Right, that's quite enough. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to be understanding. But I will not stand here and let you insult the hardworking people on this show or the audience members who took time out of their evening to be here. This interview is over. Harry looked shocked. Excuse me? You can't end the interview. I'm not done. Oh, you're done, Jonathan said firmly. You're absolutely done. I'm asking you to leave my stage. Now. You can't kick me off your show, Harry said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. Watch me, Jonathan replied. He turned to someone off camera. Can we please escort our guest out? Thank you. Harry looked around wildly. This is ridiculous. You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am? You've asked me that several times tonight, Jonathan said, And yes, I know who you are, but right now, who you are is someone who needs to leave. Two security personnel appeared at the side of the stage. They weren't aggressive, but their presence was clear. Harry looked at them, then back. At Jonathan. "You'll regret this," Harry said, his voice low and threatening. "The only person who should have regrets right now is you," Jonathan responded. "You had an opportunity to have a pleasant conversation, to connect with people who genuinely wanted to hear from you, and instead you chose to be rude, disrespectful, and frankly, quite mean. That's on you, not me." Harry opened his mouth to say something else, but Jonathan held up his hand. "Please, just go. Leave with whatever dignity you have left," Jonathan said. For a long, tense moment, Harry stood there. The cameras captured every second. The audience was frozen, watching this surreal scene unfold. Then finally, Harry turned on his heel and stormed toward the exit. As he walked away, he knocked over a small table that held a glass of water. It crashed to the floor with a loud smash. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He just kept walking until he disappeared behind the stage curtain. The studio was silent. Jonathan stood there, his hands on his hips, taking a deep breath. Then he looked out at the audience. "Well," he said, and despite everything, there was a slight smile on his face. "That was unexpected." The audience erupted, not in boos this time, but in applause. They stood up, clapping and cheering for Jonathan. He looked surprised, then genuinely touched. Thank you," he said, holding up his hands. "I want to apologize to all of you. That's not the show we planned. That's not the evening anyone expected." "You were great," someone shouted from the audience. Jonathan smiled. "I appreciate that. But honestly, I'm just sorry you had to witness that kind of behavior. You all came here for a good time, and instead you got, well, whatever that was." The applause continued. Someone started chanting Jonathan's name, and soon others joined in. He looked genuinely moved. "You're all too kind," he said. "Look, I've been doing this job for a long time. I've interviewed hundreds of people. Some interviews are great, some are just okay, and some turn into whatever we just saw. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is respect. Respect for each other, respect for the work we do, respect for you, the audience." More applause. Jonathan waited for it to die down before continuing. "I never want to speak badly about anyone. That's not who I am. But I also won't let anyone treat me or the people I work with poorly. We all deserve better than that. You deserve better than that," he said, pointing to the audience. A woman in the front row stood up. "You handled that perfectly." Jonathan nodded. "I just tried to be honest. That's all any of us can do, right? Be honest and treat people the way we want to be treated. It's not complicated." He walked over to where the table had been knocked over. Someone from the crew was already cleaning up the broken glass. Jonathan helped pick up a few pieces, carefully placing them in the crew member's hand. "Thanks for taking care of this," he said to the crew member, who looked surprised that Jonathan was helping. Then, Jonathan turned back to the audience. "You know what? We had a whole show planned tonight. We had segments prepared, other guests scheduled. But I think, if it's okay with all of you, I'd like to do something different." The audience murmured with curiosity. "How about we just talk? You and me. A real conversation. No scripts, no planned segments, just honest chat." "What do you say?" Jonathan asked. The crowd cheered in agreement. "Brilliant," Jonathan said, sitting on the edge of the stage, his legs dangling over the side. "So, let me ask you all something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was treating you badly and you had to decide whether to just take it or stand up for yourself?" Hands shot up all over the audience. Jonathan pointed to a man in the third row. "You, sir. What's your name?" "David," the man said, standing up. "Hi, David. Tell me what happened," Jonathan said. David told a story about a boss who used to yell at employees in front of customers. He'd finally stood up to him one day, and it had been terrifying, but necessary. Jonathan listened intently, nodding along. "That takes courage," Jonathan said when David finished. "Real courage. Because it's hard, isn't it? Especially when there's a power imbalance. But you did the right thing. You have to stand up for yourself." He pointed to another person, a young woman near the back. "Hi, I'm Sarah," she said. "I just want to say, what you did tonight was amazing. My boyfriend talks to me sometimes like that guest talked to you, and I always just take it because I don't want to cause problems. But watching you stand up for yourself made me realize I need to do the same." The audience applauded. Jonathan's expression was serious. "Sarah, please listen to me. You deserve to be treated with respect. Always. If someone in your life, whether it's a boyfriend, a friend, a family member, anyone, if they're speaking to you the way that guest spoke to me tonight, that's not okay. You don't have to accept that. You're worth more than that." Sarah had tears in her eyes. She nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jonathan smiled at her. "No, thank you for sharing that. And please take care of yourself. You matter." For the next 30 minutes, Jonathan continued this impromptu conversation with the audience. People shared stories about standing up for themselves, about learning to set boundaries, about the importance of self-respect. It was raw and real and nothing like a typical talk show. Someone asked Jonathan if he was worried about the consequences of kicking his guest off the show. "Honestly," Jonathan said, "I'm not worried at all, because I know I did the right thing, and that's what matters. Not ratings, not controversy, not what people will say online tomorrow. What matters is that I stayed true to my values. I treated someone with respect until they made it clear they didn't deserve that respect. And then I protected myself, and my team, and all of you. That's what matters." The audience gave him another standing ovation. A teenage girl stood up. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Jonathan said. "How did you stay so calm? If someone talked to me like that, I would have lost it," she said. Jonathan thought for a moment. "You know, it wasn't easy. Inside, I was angry. Really angry. But I've learned over the years that losing your temper doesn't help anything. It just makes things worse. So I took deep breaths. I remembered that his behavior was about him, not about me, and I focused on what I needed to do, which was end the situation." "That's so mature," the girl said. Jonathan laughed. "I'm old, that helps. But seriously, it comes with practice, and with knowing your own worth. When you know your own worth, when you respect yourself, it's easier to handle it when others don't respect you, because their opinion doesn't define you." Another person asked if Jonathan had ever had an interview go wrong before. "Oh, sure," Jonathan said. "Not quite like this, but yes. Sometimes people are in bad moods. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding. Sometimes personalities just clash. That's life. But usually, we work through it. We find common ground. We remember that we're all human. Tonight was different, because there was no willingness to find that common ground. And at that point, you have to make a decision. Do you let it continue, or do you end it? I chose to end it." "Did you give him enough chances?" someone asked. Jonathan considered this. "That's a fair question. I think I did. I tried multiple times to redirect the conversation. I tried to be understanding. I acknowledged his feelings. But at a certain point, when someone is consistently disrespectful, when they're insulting you and everyone around you, you've given them enough chances. You don't owe anyone unlimited patience, especially when they're treating you badly." The conversation continued. People asked about respect, boundaries, difficult personalities, standing up for yourself, and handling conflict. Jonathan answered every question thoughtfully, often turning questions back to the audience to hear their perspectives. At one point, a crew member came on stage and whispered something to Jonathan. He nodded and looked at the audience. Apparently, we've run way over time. But you know what? I don't care. This has been the most real, honest show I've done in a long time. Thank you all for that, he said. The audience applauded again. Before we end tonight, I want to say one more thing, Jonathan continued. What happened earlier, that wasn't about fame or status or who's more important. That was about basic human decency. It doesn't matter if you're royal or not, rich or not, famous or not. We all deserve to be treated with kindness and respect, and we all have a responsibility to treat others. That way, that's it. That's the lesson. Treat people well. He stood up from the edge of the stage, brushing off his pants. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for your understanding, your support, and your stories. You've made what could have been a terrible evening into something really special. I appreciate every single one of you, Jonathan said. The audience stood once more, applauding loudly. Jonathan waved, smiling genuinely. As the cameras pulled back, you could see the entire studio on its feet, showing their appreciation not just for a talk show host, but for someone who had stood up for what was right. The stage lights began to dim. The band started playing the closing music, and Jonathan Ross stood there, taking it all in, knowing that while the evening hadn't gone as planned, it had ended exactly as it should have. With dignity, respect, and the support of people who understood that sometimes standing up for yourself is the most important thing you can do.